In the summer of 2025, Jordan Peterson nearly died after developing pneumonia and sepsis that left him in the ICU for weeks. His daughter later revealed that the illness began after he was exposed to heavy mold while cleaning out his late father's basement, triggering what she called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, a rare and unofficial life-threatening immune condition. He reportedly suffered nerve damage, extreme sensitivities to medication, and even paralysis. It wasn't the first time Peterson's health had spiraled. Years earlier, he'd endured a near-fatal benzodiazepine withdrawal that required months of treatment abroad. This latest crisis left him bedridden and fighting for his life once again, with his daughter saying that for days, doctors weren't sure if he'd survive. Now, months later, Peterson is slowly recovering. He's reportedly regained much of his mobility, is speaking and reading again, and continues intensive physical therapy from home. His daughter says he's still very fragile but improving daily, though his public appearances, lectures, and recordings remain on hold as he focuses on regaining full strength after what she called the closest he's ever been to dying. 17-year-old Louisiana girl Caitlin Strait was 28 weeks pregnant when a road rage incident suddenly ended her life. She was shot in the head, declared brain dead, and doctors had to perform an emergency C-section to save her baby. She and her friends were simply driving when another vehicle pulled up and opened fire. Even worse, police said they had no idea why the shooter even targeted them. There was no crash, no argument, no warning. The teen was rushed to the hospital, but her injuries were irreversible, and she was kept alive just long enough to deliver her premature baby. To this day, the killer has never been found, and the motive remains a mystery. Best known for playing Martin Corley on Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, 36-year-old actor Tyler Chase has become the next tragic reminder of Hollywood's child star curse. Fans recently spotted him homeless in Los Angeles and Riverside, sparking a GoFundMe for food and shelter. Concerned strangers began sharing videos of him on TikTok and rallying support to help get him back on his feet.
Hello, my name is Tyler Chase, and I'm here on a Christian movement for acting.
But Tyler's own mother has since urged people not to donate, insisting that the man needs medical treatment, not money, explaining that he can't manage finances or even his medications on his own, and giving him money may only worsen his situation. The ashes you get after cremating a body aren't really ashes at all. During the burn, soft tissues and organs completely vaporize into gas, and any true ash is swept away through the chamber's exhaust. What's left are small bone fragments, which are then ground up in a machine called a cremulator to create the fine sand-like remains families keep in urns or scatter across Disney World. Despite the ride of steel roller coasters, posted rules and safety manual requiring riders to have 2 legs, Iraq War veteran Sergeant James Hackemer, who had lost both legs in combat, was still allowed to board the ride at Six Flags Darien Lake in 2011. Midway through the ride, he was violently ejected from his seat and killed instantly. Michael J. Fox was at the peak of his career when his life quietly turned into a tragedy. While filming Doc Hollywood at just 29 years old, he was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease, something doctors typically only see in elderly patients. He was so young that he thought the diagnosis had to be a mistake, but when specialists confirmed it, he went home, stared at the wall, and quickly fell into a deep depression, drinking heavily and hiding the truth from everyone for years, even his castmates. As the disease slowly destroyed his body, the world had no idea that while he was smiling and cracking jokes on the sitcom Spin City, his hand was shaking uncontrollably off camera. Directors had to constantly hide his symptoms by forcing him to sit during scenes or hold props with both hands. But Parkinson's didn't just steal his movement, it came with the threat of dementia, hallucination, and total loss of independence, a slow countdown he could do nothing to stop. Fox has since shattered bones from violent falls, undergone risky spinal surgery, and admitted that every day he wakes up with less control than the day before. The once energetic Back to the Future star has spent over 30 years watching himself fade in slow motion, and he said the moment he was diagnosed, "I felt my future get sucked out of the room." But instead of giving up, Michael turned his pain into purpose, founding the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which has now raised over $2 billion for Parkinson's research, making it the largest nonprofit funder of the disease in history by far. Despite losing control of his body, Fox might be the reason millions of others one day get theirs back. She killed her family not out of hatred, but because of something far more tragic. In August of 2025, a horrifying sequence unfolded in Madbury, New Hampshire. 34-year-old Emily Long shot an and killed her husband Ryan and two of their children, ages 6 and 8, before turning the gun on herself. The couple's youngest child, a toddler, was thankfully found unharmed. Ryan had been battling an aggressive form of brain cancer, and in the days before the killings, Emily had been posting tearful TikToks calling herself a brain cancer wife, speaking about the pain, exhaustion, and hopelessness of watching the man she loved fade away. What looked like a caregiver's heartbreak turned out to be a final desperate collapse, a mother who decided that if her husband couldn't survive, none of them could move forward. In February of 2000, Australian slaughterhouse worker Catherine Knight murdered her partner John Price in their home in Aberdeen, New South Wales. After an argument, she waited for him to fall asleep and stabbed him 37 times as he tried to escape, with blood evidence showing he made it to the front door before collapsing. Once he was dead, Knight used her butchering skills to skin his body in one piece and hung the skin on a meat hook in the living room. She then decapitated him and placed his head in a pot of boiling water, along with pieces of flesh to make a stew. She also cooked parts of his glutes in the oven and arranged 2 dinner plates with meat, vegetables, and gravy, each labeled with the names of Price's children, indicating she had intended to serve them their father. Police discovered the staged meal, the pot on the stove, and Price's skin hanging inside the house. Knight pled guilty to murder and in 2001 was sentenced to life in prison without parole, becoming the first woman in Australian history to receive that sentence. Kyle Marissa Roth blew up on TikTok for fearlessly exposing celebrity scandals using follower-submitted blind items. Despite her bold personality online, she was quietly battling serious health issues behind the scenes, reportedly suffering from chronic pain and illness that she never fully shared with her audience. But instead of letting it break her, she used it as fuel. Roth said that seeing other chronically ill people push through their struggles inspired her to keep making content. However, in April of 2024, she was suddenly found dead at just 36 years old, leaving millions of followers stunned and searching for answers. Even stranger, just days before she died, Roth had posted videos saying she was going through something but would explain soon. Her cause of death still hasn't publicly been released, but her family has asked for privacy and insisted that she was deeply loved. The woman who spent her life revealing secrets left the world with one of her own, but fans remember her not just for the drama she uncovered, but also for her humor, bravery, and the way she made people feel seen and entertained during their darkest days. In January of 2015, a walker passing through Squirrelwood Scout Camp near Doncaster, England, stumbled upon a sight so grimly bizarre that it made national headlines. Wedged headfirst in a rabbit hole was the body of 50-year-old Stephen Winfrey, a local hunter who had gone missing the day before after taking his dog out to catch rabbits. Investigators pieced together that Winfrey likely tried to reach into the burrow to grab his prey when his torso became trapped at an angle so tight he couldn't breathe or pull himself free. He eventually suffocated in the confined space, his legs still sticking out of the earth as if frozen mid-stride. When rescuers found him, his body was so firmly wedged that it took hours to dislodge, and soil had compacted around his face like a coffin of dirt. His loyal dog was found alive tied to a nearby tree but was trembling and dehydrated, having watched helplessly as its owner got stuck and slowly ran out of air. The coroner ruled his horrifying death an accidental asphyxiation. In 2005, Leo DiCaprio was attending a private party when an uninvited guest, 40-year-old Aretha Wilson, suddenly smashed a glass bottle and slashed him across the face and neck. She was reportedly drunk, furious, and believed DiCaprio was her ex-boyfriend, the same man who was hosting the party. The attack left Leo covered in blood, inches from having his jugular vein severed, and required 17 stitches to close the wounds. Instead of staying to face the consequences, Wilson fled the country and hid in Canada for 5 years. She was eventually extradited back to the US, where she pleaded no contest to assault with a deadly weapon and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, an incredibly light punishment considering she almost killed one of the most famous actors in the world over mistaken identity. Robert Lawrence Jr. made history in 1967 as America's first black astronaut, and he did it with unmatched skill. He held a PhD, was one of the Air Force's top test pilots, and was on track to become the first black man in space. At his first press conference, a reporter tried to joke by asking if he'd have to sit in the back of the spacecraft, and Lawrence shut it down with, "We're all officers, we all sit in the front." But less than a year later, his life was cut short during a high-speed training mission when another pilot misjudged a maneuver. Lawrence ejected, but his parachute failed to deploy properly, and he slammed into the ground, dying instantly at just 32 years old. The program was canceled soon after, and Robert Lawrence Jr.'s name was nearly lost to history. She was so terrifying that even cartel assassins friends refused to say her name out loud. Melissa La Diabla Calderon became one of the most feared women in cartel history because her crimes went far beyond gunshots and executions. Working with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, she targeted the most vulnerable, migrants, pregnant women, and the homeless, luring them with promises of safety or work before trapping them inside of makeshift clinics. Investigators say she performed crude C-sections to steal newborns for black market adoption, while the mothers were left to bleed out on the table. In other cases, victims were cut open and stripped of their organs, their bodies dumped or incinerated before corrupt medical contacts funneled their organs to wealthy buyers. Witnesses reported hearing screams through the walls at night, and bodies were found mutilated or missing several organs. Even hardened cartel enforcers were terrified of La Diabla, calling her the devil in human skin. When she was finally arrested, authorities believed dozens, maybe hundreds of her victims would never be found. This was the moment Diana Lovejoy collapsed in court after being found guilty of plotting to kill her ex-husband, Greg Mulvihill. Locked in a bitter custody battle over their young son, Lovejoy feared losing her boy and conspired with her firearms instructor Weldon McDavid Jr. to eliminate Mulvihill. In 2016, she lured her ex-husband to a remote dirt road where McDavid ambushed him with a rifle. Shot in the torso, Mulvihill survived by playing dead and calling 911. Investigators traced the attack back to Lovejoy and McDavid, and both were convicted. She received 26 years to life, while he was sentenced to 50 years. Doctors across the world have documented shocking cases of patients arriving in the ER with objects lodged deep inside their bodies. But one of the strangest in history involved a 5-pound dumbbell. The patient arrived in agonizing pain but refused to explain how it got there, forcing surgeons to perform a delicate operation to extract it. Britain's most prolific executioner, Albert Pierrepoint, spent 25 years hanging up to 600 criminals, but it was only his side hustle. By day, he ran a pub where locals drank with him, knowing full well he was also the hangman. In 1950, one of his own regulars, a man he nicknamed Tish, was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, and it was Pierrepoint himself who placed the noose around his neck and carried out the execution. During the War on Terror, U.S. interrogators turned to music as a weapon, blasting songs on endless repeat in secret detention sites. Among the most infamous tracks was Eminem's The Real Slim Shady, which detainees reported being forced to hear non-stop for up to 20 days. Former prisoners described the experience as so unbearable that men would scream, weep, and even bang their heads against the walls for hours just to escape the sound, a form of psychological torment that left no physical scars but shattered minds. In January of 2022, shoppers at a Walmart in Crockett, Texas witnessed a bizarre and disturbing encounter. A woman named Rebecca Lynette Taylor approached a mother with an infant son and casually offered her $250,000 in cash to purchase the child. When the stunned mother refused and tried to leave, Rebecca allegedly followed her into the parking lot, doubling her offer to $500,000 and insisting she'd wanted to purchase the boy for a long time. Terrified, the mother contacted police and Rebecca was arrested and charged with the felony offense of sale or purchase of a child.
Dead. Gone. Why? Because Alexander Devontae Dickey, who was arrested 39 times, 25 felonies, was on the street.
That was the father of 22-year-old Logan Federico, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief over what the justice system allowed to happen to his daughter. Despite nearly 40 arrests and more than 25 felony charges, 30-year-old Alexander Dickey was still walking free when he broke into the South Carolina home where Logan Federico was sleeping. He dragged her naked from her bed in the dark and forced her onto her knees on the floor. With a stolen 12-gauge shotgun pressed to her chest, he pulled the trigger at point-blank range, killing her instantly, execution style. Logan's father said he had to live with the knowledge that his daughter's killer, a man who had cycled in and out of prison dozens of times, should have been locked away permanently long before he was given the chance to carry out such a monstrous act. On December 10, 2021, a violent tornado tore through the Rackley family's home near Caruthersville, Missouri. 9-year-old Ernestine and her sisters huddled with their mother in a windowless bathroom, where their mom snapped a final photo to reassure relatives that they were all in their safe space. But moments later, the twister ripped the house apart and hurled the family into a nearby field. While Ernestine's parents and sisters survived with injuries, the 9-year-old girl was tragically killed. In 1999, Texas man Herschel Rawls went into surgery to have his cancerous bladder removed, but he woke up to an absolute nightmare. Without warning, doctors had also amputated his beef bayonet, claiming that the cancer had spread and that the drastic step was necessary to save his life. But weeks later, pathology tests revealed that the penile tissue they had cut away wasn't cancerous at all. After years of anguish, Rawls sued and in 2003 reached a quiet out-of-court settlement, but was left with the grim reminder of how a single surgical decision can leave a patient permanently mutilated. At just 8 years old, future UFC champion Ronda Rousey lived through a nightmare most fans never hear about. Her father, Ron Rousey, suffered a brutal sledding accident that shattered his back and left doctors warning him that he would slowly lose all mobility, develop a deadly blood disorder, and die in agonizing decline. Unable to face a future of paralysis and hopelessness, he made a devastating decision. He drove out alone one night and took his own life, leaving his wife and daughters behind. Ronda has said the trauma never left her, and that her rage, toughness, and kill or be killed mentality in the cage were born from that loss. In 2014, a Ryanair flight issued 3 warnings telling passengers not to eat nuts because a 4-year-old girl on board had a life-threatening nut allergy. One passenger ignored them, opened a packet of nuts anyway, and the girl almost immediately went into anaphylactic shock. Her tongue swelled, she turned blue, and briefly lost consciousness as crew scrambled to inject adrenaline and prepare for an emergency landing, all because one idiotic passenger couldn't resist a snack. The girl barely survived, and the airline banned the selfish passenger for 2 years. In 1997, 18-year-old Natasha Cornett and 5 friends turned a road trip into one of Tennessee's darkest crimes. At a rest stop, they encountered the Lelelid family and decided that they wanted to steal their car, so they forced them into their own van at gunpoint. On a remote back road, the family was lined up in a ditch and shot execution style. The parents died instantly, their little girl clung to life for a day before succumbing to her wounds, and the toddler somehow survived but was left blind in one eye and permanently disabled. When investigators arrived, they found the family's bloodied Bible left open in the grass and tiny children's shoes scattered at the scene, with one officer describing it as one of the most horrifying crime scenes he had ever witnessed. The killers fled in the family's van hoping to reach Mexico, but were captured within days. Cornett, who later called herself the daughter of Satan and believed that he would spare her, instead learned she was powerless, condemned to life without parole alongside her accomplices. 18-year-old Kylie Montero thought she was starting her future, newly graduated, 11 weeks pregnant, and dreaming of naming her baby girl Eleanor. But instead, she walked straight into a nightmare. Her boyfriend, 22-year-old Gregory Groom, had a violent history she tried to escape, even hiding in a domestic abuse shelter for 3 weeks. But like too many victims before her, she went back hoping he'd change. On August 6, 2025, during a late-night visit to his house, an argument turned terrifying when Gregory threw her to the ground, pulled her hair, and started strangling her. Knowing something was seriously wrong, she sent one last chilling text to her sister. "My phone is at 4%. If I die, it was Greg." Moments later, he reportedly stabbed her in the neck and chest, killing not just Kylie, but also the unborn child she was excited to raise. Instead of calling for help, he spent hours digging a grave in his own backyard, and around sunrise, he shoved her body into the shallow hole like trash. For 13 days, Kylie's family begged for answers while Gregory acted innocent, until police finally found her buried behind his house. He was arrested and has pleaded not guilty. In 2011, one of the most horrific workplace murders unfolded inside a Lululemon store in Bethesda, Maryland. When employees arrived one morning, they found the shop in pure chaos. Blood smeared across the walls and floor, broken merchandise scattered everywhere, and 2 female employees lying in the back room. One of them was 30-year-old Jana Murray, beaten and slashed beyond recognition. The other woman, her coworker Brittany Norwood, was tied up and claiming that 2 masked men had broken in and attacked them both. But investigators quickly realized her story didn't add up. Forensics revealed that Murray had sustained at least 331 separate injuries from a hammer, wrench, knife, rope, box cutter, and metal stand, and that she had been alive for all of them, her body showing signs of conscious struggle throughout the 15-minute assault. It turned out Norwood had killed her coworker after being caught trying to steal merchandise, then staged the entire scene and bound herself to make it look like a robbery. The crime completely shocked the nation, not just for its savagery, but for the fact that every blow, cut, and stab was inflicted by someone that Murray had entrusted to lock up the store beside her. before. In May of 2025, 46-year-old Christy Crampton was arrested after a disturbing in-flight altercation with a child who allegedly called her fat and Miss Piggy. The two were returning from a trip to Disney World when the situation suddenly spiraled out of control. Witnesses say Crampton began striking the boy with her fists and a water bottle, even slamming his head against the airplane window. When questioned, she told police the child had been disrespectful and had pushed her arm away before she snapped. One witness told investigators the woman wasn't correcting the child, she was abusing him. Crampton was charged with felony child abuse and released on bond, while the child's identity, relation to her, and condition were not disclosed. Before gunning down Mahatma Gandhi in 1948, his assassin Nathuram Godse had already tried to kill him twice before. In 1944, he led a group that charged Gandhi with knives during a prayer meeting, and later that year, he confronted him again wielding a dagger. Both times he was caught but released. Gandhi, committed to his philosophy of nonviolence and forgiveness, reportedly refused to press charges. That mercy would prove fatal just 4 years later when Godse finally succeeded in his third attempt, firing 3 bullets into the man who preached nothing but peace. Behind the wild persona of Tiger King's Joe Exotic was a trail of cruelty even darker than what viewers saw on Netflix. Former employees recalled how he casually shot animals that displeased him, once killing a woman's horse within minutes of her donation and laughing about it before feeding its body to his tigers. He was accused of shooting older tigers in the head to make room for new cubs, animals that drew much bigger crowds and more profit. His zoo's kitchen was piled high with expired Walmart meat, which not only fed the big cats but was allegedly also cooked into pizzas for paying customers. A mysterious fire that destroyed his studio wiped out days of footage that insiders claimed showed him brutally executing animals on camera. Even his music career was a lie. He hired musicians to record songs and then lip-synced over them in his bizarre videos. As his empire collapsed, investigators uncovered a murder-for-hire plot against his rival Carol Baskin and evidence of him killing at least 5 of his own tigers. For all the flamboyance, costumes, and chaos, the legacy Joe Exotic left behind is one of exploitation, cruelty, and death. A man who apparently turned suffering into a spectacle and ended up caged himself. In 1999, 23-year-old Fan Man Yi of Hong Kong was kidnapped by a loan shark and 2 accomplices after stealing a small sum of money. For over a month, she was held captive in a Sim Sha Sui apartment, where she was beaten with metal bars, burned with melted plastic, forced to smile through torture, and subjected to humiliating commands until she finally died from her injuries. Her killers then dismembered her body, boiling the remains, and sewing her skull into a large Hello Kitty mermaid doll. The crime only came to light when a teenage accomplice confessed, claiming she was being haunted by Fan's ghost, leading police to one of the most horrifying discoveries in Hong Kong's history.